This next question sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Nick Hart in Olaf, Kansas.
Olathe, Kansas. Olathe.
You're familiar with it.
It's a place in Kansas.
Have you been there?
I've been through there.
How many times have you worked in Kansas?
Oh, God. Well,
I mean, more than you can count?
Well, no, not more than I can count right now because I don't remember exactly. I'd have to get all my books and do some research, but not that many. We worked Kansas City a couple of times. I've famously told the story for the Central States office, but also for Crockett and Vince running Kansas City. St. Louis is in Missouri. Kansas City is in both Kansas and Missouri. There's a Kansas City, Kansas, and a Kansas City, Missouri. So the Central States office used to run Kansas City, Kansas, but the big building, what was it, Kemper Arena? That was in Kansas City, Missouri. So that might not count for the WWF as working Kansas, even though I was in Kansas City. But then there was Carry On My Wayward Son and Dust in the Wind and People of the South Wind and all those other great Kansas hits.
All right, well, let's see if this is a Kansas hit.
And I think I worked Topeka one night.
Well, here's a question from Nick Hart. Good morning, Jim and Brian. Can you please explain the origins and connotations of the words rib and stooge within the context of pro wrestling? People who are unfamiliar with pro wrestling think rib to mean a delicious meal when it comes from pigs. So the delicious meal when it comes from pigs. And a stooge is a character from an old television show. Thank you for the entertainment and enjoyment.
Well, rib is not a wrestling term per se. Rib used to be, watch any of the old 30s B movies. Oh, you got to be ribbing me. It was, smart ass talk, slang in the 30s and 40s. You're ribbing me. It's a joke. It's a rib, whatever. And it stuck with wrestling. So it wasn't like rib was just necessarily a carny term or anything. People in those days knew what it was, but it stuck in wrestling, whereas, terminologies change and other things. With, what was the other thing?
Stooge.
The reason why the Three Stooges were called the Three Stooges was because they were the Stooges. They were the minions of a guy named Ted Healy, who was a vaudeville comedian. And when they first got in the movies, the Three Stooges came with Ted Healy, who was the star of the movie, and the Stooges did their thing. Stooges is a gopher, a fetch and carry guy, a mope, a mooch, some idiot that does your bidding, right? He's your stooge. And that was a phrase that was in common everyday lingo back in the 20s and 30s as well. But again, it stuck in wrestling because it came to be applied to a stooge. An office stooge was the referee or one of the guys that had a job in that promotion forever because he was a flunky or a stooge that did the bidding and or told the boss, the promoter, the booker, dirt and scoops on the talent. So that became, and that it not only so-and-so is somebody's stooge, their gopher or their flunky, but also to stooge off something meant that stooge was going to go to the office and tell on you for something you did that you didn't want them to know about. You got stooged on or stooged off. So those were common terms in the United States, at least at some point, and just meandered into wrestling and got stuck there. But that's always been a term in wrestling and a term in general life for, a flunky or just some minion. And the stooge part as relates to, telling secrets and telling on guys kind of went along with that. Does that make any sense?
What do you think now when you're seeing terms that are wrestling terms getting brought back into mainstream society?
Well, it was weird when...
Like jabroni on Always Sunny.
Well, yes, because jabroni jabroni was a wrestling term that started out as jobber, jabberoonie, jabroni, that kind of thing. And Lawler used to use it on TV in the 70s when he was a heel. You're nothing but a no good jabroni. So when The Rock started using it, it was funny to me, but a lot of guys were like, wow, they hadn't heard it used on TV before. There was, an inside term being used on TV. But, again, like when I had anxiety attacks, when Snoop Dogg put out his first record and started doing the off-brand version of Carney. It wasn't really Carney, but it was close enough that I was like, fuck, that's a little close. We can't say that too loud anymore. You used to be able to speak Carney right out in front of the fans and they wouldn't pick up on it and nobody knew what the fuck. But with Snoop Dogg doing a kind of an offshoot of it, it gave you the key. If you tried hard enough, you could figure it out. And then it get my butthole tightened every time I heard that shit on the radio. I didn't know we'd have much bigger problems coming up in 20 years or so. But yeah, I mean, it's terminology changes. And you can, if you watch a lot of old movies, especially the old, the fucking Howard Hawks movies where they had quick, snappy dialogue and sometimes tromped over each other to make it more natural. And the patter, the old phrases of patterns of speech and figures of speech and ways of talking. It's, you can tell how things have changed, but every once in a while something comes back around. But right now, I don't know that any wrestler in the business now understands how to actually use the wrestling terminology, and more of them use it like the fans on the internet use it than the way it actually is applied or was originally the original intent of the whole thing. That's why I put that glossary in behind the curtain, available at jimcornette.com, to tell people what were really wrestling terms and what weren't, what became wrestling terms because people applied them even though they weren't really, and what many of those terms actually meant instead of the weird meanings that they've given them today. I love it. I love it in a sarcastic way. It gives me gas when people will say, and then the babyface goes out and gets their heat. What? That's a complete mutually exclusive term. You know, the heel goes out and gets his heat. Babyface goes out and gets a little shine put on him, then gets heat put on him, and then makes a comeback. But if your babyface goes out and gets a lot of heat, he's done his job backwards. Just shit like that.
Well, you can't expect them to speak Carney if they can't even figure out exactly what a Carney is.
I don't think they can find the county fair.